The Carnival of Agony, the true, absurd, and terrifying tale of the 1904 St. Louis Marathon. The man approaching the finish line was no longer human. His face was a mask of slack-jawed gray, his eyes rolling back into a skull that seemed too heavy for his neck. His legs were moving, but not by his own volition. They were merely pendulums of dead weight, shuffling forward in a mechanical rhythm of agony. He was hallucinating, convinced the finish line was still 20 miles away, whispering to ghosts that hovered in the shimmering heat. Beside him, two handlers gripped his arms, effectively dragging him forward. They weren't just supporting him, they were keeping a corpse upright. Over the last 3 hours, they had fed him a cocktail that would kill a modern horse: raw eggs, brandy, and multiple injections of strychnine, rat poison. This man was Thomas Hicks, and the terrifying part wasn't that he was dying. The terrifying part was that he was winning. This was not a scene from a dystopian horror film. This was the pinnacle of athletic achievement in the United States of America. This was the 1904 Olympic Marathon. Part 1. The Hubris of St. Louis. To understand the disaster, you must first understand the stage. The year was 1904. The United States was flexing its muscles on the global stage, flushed with the optimism of the new century. St. Louis, Missouri had secured the rights to host both the World's Fair and the first Olympic Games ever held on American soil. It was supposed to be a coronation of American greatness. Instead, it became a circus. The organizer of the Games was James Sullivan, a man whose ego was dwarfed only by his ignorance of human physiology. Sullivan was a staunch believer in purposeful dehydration. He wanted to use the marathon, the crown jewel of the Olympics, as a scientific experiment. He believed that water made runners weak. To prove his theory, he minimized water stations on the course. For a 24.85-mile race, the modern 26.2 standard hadn't been set yet, ran under the brutal Midwestern sun with temperatures soaring to 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius and 90% humidity, Sullivan provided exactly one water station. It was located at the 11-mile mark. It was a water well, and the water was poisonous, contaminated with rust and runoff. The course itself was not a track, it was a death march. It wound through the dusty country roads of St. Louis County, traversing 7 distinct hills. The roads were unpaved, covered in inches of thick limestone dust. To make matters worse, the runners would not be alone on the road. They would be sharing it with automobiles, new inventions that kicked up massive clouds of dust, delivery wagons, trains, and pedestrians. Into this furnace stepped 32 men. Part 2. A cast of characters. If the course was a disaster, the starting lineup was a comedy sketch. Only a handful were experienced marathon runners. The rest were a motley crew of drifters, opportunists, and curiosities gathered from the World's Fair exhibits. There was Fred Lorz, a bricklayer from New York. He was a prankster by nature, a man with a smile that suggested he knew a joke you didn't. He had done no training for the heat. There was Felix Carvajal, a former mailman from Cuba. He raised money for his trip to St. Louis by running across Cuba and begging for donations. Upon arriving in New Orleans, he promptly lost all his money in a crapshoot game. He had to walk and hitchhike the remaining 700 miles to St. Louis. He arrived at the starting line minutes before the gun, wearing street clothes, heavy wool trousers, a long-sleeved shirt, and boots. A friendly discus thrower took pity on him and used scissors to hack his trousers into makeshift shorts. There were Len Tao and Jan Mashiani, 2 Tswana tribesmen from South Africa. They weren't there for the Olympics. They were actually part of the World's Fair's Boer War reenactment exhibit. They ran barefoot. Len Tao was the first black African to compete in the modern Olympics. And then there was Thomas Hicks, a British-born American brass worker. He was a serious runner, serious enough to have a support team, but his team, armed with their medicine, would prove to be his greatest danger. At 3:03 p.m., in the blistering heat of the afternoon, the gun fired. Part 3. The Dust Bowl. Chaos ensued immediately. The course was not closed to traffic. As the runners took off, the official cars and press vehicles drove ahead of them. The tires churned the loose limestone dust into a choking, opaque fog. The runners weren't breathing air, they were inhaling pulverized rock. Within 3 miles, the coughing started. Men began to vomit. William Garcia from California was one of the favorites. He was a strong runner, built for endurance. By mile 8, he collapsed on the side of the road, gasping for air, blood foaming at his lips. He didn't just have heat stroke. The dust had coated his esophagus and ripped apart his stomach lining. He was rushed to a hospital and narrowly avoided death by hemorrhaging. Meanwhile, the Cuban postman, Felix Carvajal, was having a lovely time. Despite his heavy boots and lack of training, Carvajal was running at a leisurely pace, stopping to chat with spectators. His lack of English didn't stop him from practicing his conversational skills. At one point, he realized he was hungry. He hadn't eaten for 40 hours. He spotted an orchard with some peaches. He hopped the fence, ate 2, and felt better. A bit further down the road, he saw an apple tree. He grabbed 2 green apples and devoured them. The apples were rotten. Miles later, Carvajal was found lying on the side of the road, clutching his stomach, suffering from severe cramps. He took a nap. Yes, in the middle of the Olympic marathon, he slept. While Carvajal napped and Garcia bled, Fred Lorz, the bricklayer from New York, was leading the pack. But by mile 9, the heat broke him. His legs seized up. He waved to a passing support car, an expensive automobile carrying spectators. "Can you give me a lift back to the stadium?" Lorz asked. The driver shrugged. "Hop in." Lorz sat back, enjoying the breeze as the car rumbled past the exhausted, dying runners. He waved at them cheekily. He traveled 11 miles by car. Then, tragedy or comedy struck. The engine broke down. The driver popped the hood. "It's the engine. We're stuck." Lorz looked at the smoking engine, then at his legs. He felt rested. He felt refreshed. He realized he was only 5 miles from the finish line. "Well," Lorz said, hopping out of the car, "I guess I'll finish up." He started jogging again. Part 5. The African Incident. Elsewhere on the course, Len Tao and Jan Masciani were running a solid race. Len Tao, specifically, was making excellent time and could have easily medaled. However, the St. Louis organizers had forgotten to secure the local stray dog population. Running through a rural patch of the course, Len Tao was suddenly confronted by a pack of feral dogs. This was not part of the Olympic rulebook. Tao didn't panic, he simply ran for his life. Unfortunately, running for your life meant running away from the course. The dogs chased him a mile off track into a cornfield before he managed to lose them. Despite this terrifying detour, he would still manage to finish 9th. Part 6. The Science of Poison. The race had now devolved into a survival horror, but the darkest chapter belonged to Thomas Hicks. By mile 10, Hicks was exhausted. He begged his handlers for water. They refused. Remember, James Sullivan's science said water was bad. Instead, they sponged his mouth with warm distilled water, tantalizing him without letting him drink. By mile 17, Hicks began to falter. He turned pale and his head lolled. His trainer, Charles Lucas, decided it was time for modern medicine. He reached into his medical kit and pulled out a syringe filled with strychnine sulfate. Strychnine is a potent pesticide used to kill rats. In high doses, it causes convulsions and death by asphyxiation. However, in 1904, it was mistakenly believed to be a stimulant in small doses. Lucas injected 1/60th of a grain of rat poison directly into Hicks's arm. To wash it down, he fed Hicks a raw egg. Hicks perked up for a mile, his body reacting to the toxin with a jolt of panicked adrenaline. Then the crash came. His legs turned to lead. He began to hallucinate. "I'm tired," Hicks mumbled. "I want to lie down." "No," his trainer said. They prepared a second injection, another dose of rat poison, and this time they washed it down with a glass of brandy. Heat plus dehydration plus rat poison plus alcohol. It was a lethal combination. Part 7. The Fraudulent Champion. Back at the stadium, the crowd roared. A runner had entered the gates. It was Fred Lorz, the man who had ridden 11 miles in a car. Lorz jogged onto the track, looking remarkably fresh for a man who had supposedly run 25 miles in 90-degree heat. The crowd, unaware of the automobile ride, cheered wildly. The band struck up "Hail to the Chief." Alice Roosevelt, the daughter of President Theodore Roosevelt, was waiting at the finish line with a gold wreath. Lorz broke the tape. He smiled, ready to accept the medal. Just as Alice Roosevelt was about to place the wreath on his head, a furious official burst onto the track. "Stop! It's a fraud!" the official screamed. "He rode in a car!" The crowd gasped. Lorz's smile faltered, then widened into a grin. He laughed. "I was only joking. I never intended to keep the medal. It was just a prank." The officials were not amused. They banned him for life, though they reinstated him a year later. Part 8. The Walking Dead. The crowd, confused and deflated, waited for the real winner. Minutes turned to half an hour. Finally, Thomas Hicks appeared. He was a terrifying sight. He was no longer running. His trainers were holding him up by the shoulders, his feet dragging in the dirt. He was hallucinating that he was the Emperor of Rome. His eyes were glazed. He had lost 10 pounds during the race. His trainers practically carried him down the final stretch. As he approached the line, they let him go just long enough for him to stumble across. He collapsed immediately. Doctors rushed to him. His heart was barely beating. If he had run another mile, or perhaps even another 100 yards, the strychnine and heat stroke would have killed him. It took 4 doctors and an hour of emergency treatment on the grass of the infield to revive him. He was too weak to accept his trophy. He had to be carried out on a stretcher. Part 9. The Aftermath. The rest of the finishers trickled in. Felix Carvajal, the napping postman, woke up from his slumber, adjusted his makeshift shorts, and jogged to the finish line. He finished 4th. Had he not stopped to chat, steal peaches, eat rotten apples, and take a nap, he almost certainly would have won the gold medal. The weightlifting champion of the Olympics, who had entered the marathon on a whim, nearly died. The dust in his lungs caused a respiratory infection, so severe he was hospitalized for weeks. In the end, only 14 of the 32 starters finished the race. James Sullivan, the organizer, looked at the carnage, the near deaths, the cheating, the poisonings, and concluded that the experiment was a success. He wrote a report stating that the marathon demonstrated great physical stamina. Epilogue. The 1904 St. Louis Marathon remains the weirdest sporting event in human history. It had everything: cheating, a winner who rode in a car; danger, a runner chased miles off course by wild dogs; absurdity, a runner who napped and still came in 4th; bad science, a winner fueled by rat poison and brandy. Thomas Hicks never ran professionally again. He sold his gold medal and vanished into obscurity, likely just happy to be alive. The race serves as a bizarre monument to a different time, a time of raw, unregulated ambition, where the line between bravery and stupidity wasn't just blurred, it was completely erased by a cloud of limestone dust.